Hey guys, on today's episode, we're going to be visiting my buddy Dominic, who has an amazing collection of cars, one of which is a 2001 Audi RS4 Avant. As you can see here, Doug did a review of it recently. Now, the car was just purchased, so it needs a little love. It needs to be detailed because we're taking it to a car show in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to head over there, pick it up, come back here, do a full restoration. That and a whole lot more in this episode of Drive and Protect. With the Taycan back at Porsche Greenwich for some scheduled maintenance, me and my new loaner Macan arrived at a very nondescript warehouse to pick up the Audi. And when there's a building of this size, it's usually filled with some cool stuff. And sure enough, inside, when I met up with Dominic and his son Evan to take a look at their latest acquisition, the RS4, I was understandably distracted with the size and scope of his collection. There was muscle cars, supercar. I'm just unreal when you see it in person.
You know, the car's approaching a decade and it's, you know, it still looks amazing. Stripped down light, you know, race car. It's just like, that's just so amazing. Cool. I think the only other one in this color at that time was Jamiroquai's LaFerrari.
Really?
Gonna go to the same show that the RS4 Avant is going to.
To cap it all off, he has a huge backlit photo of the SP1 across his back wall, which is absolutely stunning. If you remember, I did an SP2 in the studio a few months ago. To watch the full tour of every single car, head over to the Ammo Studio channel for more behind-the-scenes footage to nerd out on his collection. I'll put a link in the description below. Great color.
Great color, Nogaro blue. I think there's only maybe 3 or 4 in the country. You know, this is that famous blue federalized one.
Yeah.
You know, we've had it probably a little less than a year. When we got it, it had some modifications to it. So we just really, you know, worked to get it back, to get the suspension where it would need to be, put the right brakes in, you know, do a whole bunch of work for it, get the taillights back. But now we're getting ready to, you know, take it on the road a little bit. We're gonna bring it to Cars and Coffee in a couple of weeks. And we really want to get her, you know, looking the way she should.
I can handle that, but I do have one question. Do you have any other cars in here or no?
No.
There you go. With that, I took the wagon back to the studio to start the makeover.
RS4, baby.
When I arrived underneath the lights, you can see the paint is actually scratched up and lightly swirled everywhere. The headlights are a bit foggy. The black grille is now a bit whitish and dull, but more concerning were the bumpers. These had overspray and tape lines indicating it had been sprayed prior to the purchase and done so without removing the bumpers from the car. As you can see here, the dots of overspray from not working in, let's say, a downdraft paint booth and likely outside with ambient temperature and winds and all this kind of outside factors working on the sprayer, the guy who's actually doing the work. So a lot of these factors are not conducive to a best finished product. However, the most challenging part of the correction is the water spots on the glass, which we're going to address later on in the episode, the fading of the Recaro seats, and the overall level of dirt in all the door jambs. This car in particular is going to require a lot of what we call frame detailing, which is where I focus on incremental improvements on smaller areas of the car. So let the fun begin. Step 1, of course, is to remove the hubcaps, which are incredibly delicate and kind of a pain in the butt to put on, as you'll see at the end of the episode. Loosen the lug nuts and remove the wheels. As you can see, the rotors and the calipers look like they've been replaced or at least upgraded at some point in the past, so that's great. But the wheels, suspension, and undercarriage do need some love. With everything soaking, I then sprayed Titan 12 degreaser on my dual density undercarriage brush to agitate and now, with the use of the brush, loosen and lift the grime from the surface prior to power washing it off. Found bubblegum stuck to the wheel well of the passenger side front plastic, which was fun to play with. Then I power washed again and blew out all the seams for any last trapped dirt or mud. Then I repeated the same steps on the paint, all the while looking at the water spots on the paint and of course the glass, which is going to be my nemesis on this project. Just a quick FYI, my focus in this wash process was really on the door jambs. They were, for whatever reason, abnormally muddy or crusty, I think might be the right word, almost like it was driven off-road a bunch and just sat. I'm going to need to address these a few different times during the detail, but for now, a brush, degreaser, and some soap as step number 1. With the car now clean and the paint dry, I played with the rims and the hubcaps, which were not all that bad. Brute and Plum were more than enough to just get them ready for the wheel coating later in the day. Next, I removed the back seat bottom and both front seats. Now, if you're just cleaning the seats themselves, I would have just left them in the car because they're really not that dirty. But Dominic did ask if we can get them re-dyed to improve the overall look without having to reupholster everything, which is kind of a process. So I'll have the guys from Fiber New come in later in the week, but for now, I removed everything that was easily disassembled. Next, I started cleaning the plastics and leather with lather, but the oils and greases were just so heavy in particular areas that they needed a degreaser. Now keep in mind, in general, I try to avoid using degreasers on interiors and especially carpets, unless there's grease present. There's a bit of a misnomer of the quote-unquote all-in-one cleaner. It's a bit confusing because it's hard to be a low pH and certainly hard to be a high pH at the same exact time. As they say, jack of all trades, master of none, that sort of thing. So yes, use a degreaser when required, but re-clean that area that was just degreased with lather or another opposing pH level to leave the material in a neutral or at least close to neutral state when you're done. The next day, I invited Dan and Renan to help with the Koenigsegg because we only had a few hours to prep the paint before it was jetting off to its next show. However, the transportation of the Koenigsegg to the studio was delayed for various reasons, so we hopped back on the RS4 in the meantime. So that's why they sort of suddenly appear in the video, if you're wondering. I scrubbed the interior with Renan while Dan cleaned the carpets and removed yet more gum for some reason by hand and the Tornador, then steam cleaned everything. Check out the coffee stains on the passenger side floor. We used siphon, which has a specific pH, to clean that specific stain. Same concept I mentioned before about the degreaser. Look how much was released up into the steamer just from a small coffee spill. Crazy what one misplaced drink can do to your carpets. Afterwards, we worked on round 2 of the door jambs while we waited for the Koenigsegg to arrive. Now, if you haven't seen the video, click the link above. This thing shoots flames in the studio. You gotta see it. A few days later, the Fiber New guys that came in for the 300 CD seat repair on last week's episode also cleaned, sanded, and re-dyed these seats to sort of freshen up the tired leather at a fraction of the cost of completely reupholstering them, much the same as I did on the R8 buckets a few years ago. I'll put a link to the full-length how-to video in the description below. About 2 days later, I started on the paint correction. Now, as you can see, there are plenty of scratches, some deeper gouges, and one huge paint chip on the driver's side down by the bumper, again, indicating the bumper was likely repainted at some point in its life. So the first thing I like to do is measure the paint in the hood, which was consistent in about the 6 range, which is a great sign. Clearly, as you can see in the background, I had to hop off the RS4 and then work on the Koenigsegg, then go back to the paint restoration on the RS4 later on while waiting for Reflex Pro to cure on the CC850. So we had a lot of things going on. Likewise, for those of you keeping track, I'm performing a two-step paint correction, first with wool and polish, then finishing with foam and the same polish. I wanted to try to get away with one step, but the water spots and the love marks were just too deep, so I had to do a two-step, which was necessary in this case. But the front bumper and the headlights would need a bit more attention. Step 1 with my pivot bottle is to spray soapy water on the area to be clayed and remove as much of the overspray as possible with the clay bar. Next, I repeated the same polishing steps as I did on the paint, but with a new pad, as it's likely to get full super fast from the extra overspray I'm going to be removing that didn't get removed by the clay bar. Afterwards, the bumper looked great, but the headlight needed some love. In hindsight, I should have just done the headlights first, but they didn't look as bad until I made the bumpers look so good. So I used masking tape to protect my work on the bumper, which wasn't a big deal. On the 3-inch machine, I used the interface pad to contour to the light surface with 800 grit sandpaper. When I went to wipe it off, you can see that someone probably applied some type of coating to it that has faded a while back, or maybe it's just original dead OEM UV protection that has already yellowed and started failing over the years. Either way, it just has to be removed. Next was 1500 grit, then of course 3000 grit, but I ran out of the 3-inch version of it, so I did it by hand with a sanding block and it still worked out great. After that, I compounded with a 3-inch microfiber pad and blue compound, then I used the yellow pad and the yellow polish. Next, I cleaned the surface with alcohol and then applied a plastic headlight UV coating. You can pretty much get them anywhere these days, but it's absolutely critical to apply one or it's going to turn yellow and foggy in just a few weeks, as the plastic light has no, for the lack of a better word, sunscreen on it. The final product looked much better and now matches the level of cleanliness of the bumper, so there's no wild contrast between the two of them. While I had my 3-inch machines out, I quickly polished the engine coverings as well for a bit more depth when you open the hood. Once the paint, bumper, and headlights were all done, I needed to sort out the water spots on the glass, as this is really causing an eyesore, especially now that the paint is looking so much better. Okay, now that we removed the overspray from both the front and rear bumper, we're gonna focus on the water spots. We had water spots on the paint and we have water spots on the glass. Now, just to back up a little bit, water spots, for sort of a synopsis, a short version, is it's minerals within the water, what we call hard water. They get on the car, the water evaporates, leaving behind those minerals, and the minerals basically chew into whatever it's sitting on. In this case, it'd be the paint or the glass. Now on the paint, because the paint's typically softer than glass, you can polish that out, you can compound that out most 90% of the times. If not, then you can use something like acid that will eat up the minerals. Now, if we jump to the glass, that's where it gets a little bit more tricky. Why? Because glass is a little bit harder, so you have to use harder things to get it out. Now, the first step that we normally do is compound the glass. A little bit strange, a little bit challenging. Sometimes there's glass that has a little bit of plastic in between, like the windshield. You can't heat it up too much because that plastic in between, meaning if somebody hits it with a rock or hits it with a baseball bat.
Grandson decided he wanted to break it when we weren't here, and he said it took 8 times.
Or something like that. It's not going to explode all over you like a normal piece of glass, like a vase or something. So if you heat that up, you may burn that middle part and you're going to ruin the glass. So the moral of the story is when you're working on glass, you want to keep it as cool as possible. That's why you see them actually, when they're grinding glass down, you see a lot of water involved. So let's move over or fast forward to over here. When we're talking about glass, you can first try compounding, which we're going to do, and then after that you can use acid. Acid typically is going to re-etch and kind of chew up all those minerals. The downside to that is if you let it sit too long, you can actually etch the glass. If you rinse it off and the water drips down here and it's acid, you could actually, ruin the paint in the process. So it's a little bit of a sticky or challenging process, to say the least. The first thing you want to do is I'm going to put a piece of tape down here. Now, I've already done this one, so I know the answer on this one. It actually works with compound. So I'm using the same exact, this one over here, pad and polish, and I'm going to polish the glass. I'll show you the before and after, and in some cases this will actually work. If it doesn't, then you're gonna have to boost up to acid. As you can see after the 50-50 shot, the glass still has light or normal scratches on it, but the watermarks are mostly gone. In the edges, I use a microfiber towel by hand to get in the tighter spots that the machine couldn't reach. Again, I want to be super clear. This isn't going to work all the time and acid may be required, but I strongly advise not using acid if possible, as it can actually etch the glass worse than the water spots if used improperly. After the glass, I coated the wheels with Gillette Pro wheel coating to make cleaning them easier in the future. First, I primed a blue microfiber applicator pad, applied it to the wheel, let it sit for about 30 to 60 seconds, and buff it off. It's super easy. While all of that was curing, I applied touch-up to the front clip as you saw in the beginning of the episode. There's a big chunk taken out. Notice that I'm not wiping or painting it on. It's like I'm sort of dabbing, tap, 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 and letting it flow off the brush. Now, this will help you avoid brush strokes and the repair looking unnatural when it dries. To get the specific touch-up for this color, I had to remove the gas door cover and bring it into the paint shop so that they could do a color scan on it. The gas door removal is a good trick instead of actually driving the car over there, or in past you'd have to like remove the entire hood, bring it over. It's just kind of a pain in the butt, so always think about the gas door. Once the touch-up was cured, I applied Reflex Pro to the paint. While the reflex was curing, I then began the framing process, which is when you focus on all the secondary components of the car that, when all added up as one, make a huge overall difference to the aesthetics or the appearance of the car. Now, on a side note, I have a full-length episode with Kevin Brown working on Mike Musto's Porsche 996 in Los Angeles at the Westside Collector Car Storage with Matt Farah. So we go over the entire process of framing. It's super interesting. I'll put a link above. In this case, on the RS4, I'm applying a framing formula I'm still playing with on a designated brush, and then I just literally brush it in. When I'm done spreading the product in with the brush, I then use compressed air to blow away any high spots or puddles of product that have accumulated, and the difference is night and day. It's absolutely amazing. Again, all these little steps and details combined is what accumulates into a quality finished product, and probably how our craft derived its name as detailing. Lastly, I applied mud to the rubber, quickly cleaned the glass with my squeegee and towel method, then reinstalled the seats, which is always an adventure and patience, especially after a long few days of detailing. With the wheels now torqued and the wildly frustrating hubcaps back on the car, it was now time for some well-deserved rest. In the morning, I'll take it back to Dominic's garage to join the family of cars. What do you think, man?
It's amazing.
Good to see you.
It's night and day.
Crazy, right?
It's just, the car looks brand new. I mean, it's just, for 21 years old.
We had so many people come to the shop just to like look at other cars. We had the Koenigsegg, all this crazy stuff, and all of them would just gravitate towards. I'm like, hey, there's a crazy car over there. What do you look at? They're like, no, I've seen this one. The mail guy, the UPS guy, and the FedEx guy. All were like, this is my dream come true. It was super cool. But yeah, this has been a treat. The windows came out really great. That was kind of like
the glass, they're mirrors now. It's just absolutely amazing. I didn't think the car could look this good. I didn't think it looked that bad before, but it's like absolutely
awesome.
100% different. I can't thank you enough.
You're the man. Enjoy.
Thank you.
All right. Well, guys, there you have it. Dominic's happy. The car looks absolutely amazing, and it's an incredibly rare RS4 Avant. Now, as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. And if you see a car in the background that you want to see on next week's episode, be sure to leave a comment below. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time. Here's a sneak peek of what's coming up on next week's episode. See you then.